Okay,
Um,
start.
Good morning, good afternoon, the academics and scholars around the world. So I'm delighted to welcome you all to this online workshop on publishing research articles in higher education, higher impact journals. My name is Dr. Riyad Ismail. I am the coordinator of the Research and Innovation Cell here at Faculty of Management and Commerce at Southeastern University of Sri Lanka. It is a privilege to have you with us today. Today's session promises to be enlightening and valuable experience as we have the distinct honor of hosting an eminent scholar and researcher, Professor Khalid Hussaini from Portsmouth University in the United Kingdom. Professor Hussaini is a distinguished expert in accounting and financial management and has a remarkable track record of publishing articles in high-impact journals. His expertise and insights will undoubtedly prove to be guiding light for all of us, particularly for our early career academic staff and postgraduate students. The primary goal of this workshop webinar is to equip our participants with strategies and practical tips on enhancing research publication prospects. By the end of this workshop, we hope that you will leave with a wealth of knowledge and actionable insights that will empower you to publish your research in high impact journals. Furthermore, these newfound skills and strategies will aid in strengthening our institution's presence in the academic world. So this webinar is designed to interactive and engaging. We encourage you to actively participate, ask questions, and share your thoughts after the presentation session. So you can use the chat function to ask questions or provide comments, and we will do our best to address them during the question and answer session. I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Khalid Hussaini to generously sharing his time and expertise with us today. I would also like to thank all of you, our participants, for your commitment to enhancing your research publication prospects and contributing to the academic excellence. So before we proceed further, we have the distinct honor of having Dr. MGS Safina Hassan, the Dean of our faculty, who would like to share a few words of encouragement and wisdom with us. Dr. Safina is not only a respected leader within our institution, but also a driving force behind our commitment to excellence in research and academia. Her guidance and support have been instrumental in shaping our academic endeavor. Dear Madam, please welcome. It's over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Riyad. Good afternoon, everyone. Also, thanks for joining with us. Wonderful day this evening. Once again, good afternoon, all academics and scholars. I'm truly honored to be here today among a group of dedicated and aspiring researchers and scholars. As the Dean of our stream faculty of Southeastern Faculty of Management and Commerce, Southeastern University of Sri Lanka, it is both a privilege and a pleasure to address you all. The pursuit of knowledge, research is the driving force that propels us forward. It's a journey marked by curiosity and tenacity and unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth that shape our world. Each of you, as early career academic staff and postgraduate students, stand at the threshold of a remarkable adventure. Research is not only merely a means to an end, but a continuous process of growth and enlightenment. It is about pursuing boundaries, challenging conventions, and expanding the horizon of human understanding. It is a path that demands resilience, and a willingness to embrace both success and setbacks. Throughout my own academic journey, I have come to appreciate the profound impact of collaboration, particularly on an international scale. Engaging with device deserves perspectives and harnessing and collaborative expertise of global peers can be transformative, not just for your research, but for your personal and professional growth. I encourage you to seize the opportunities presented by today's workshop. Professor Khalid Hussaini, an esteemed expert in accounting and finance management, will provide you with invaluable insight into navigating the complex world of publishing in higher impact journals. His experiences and guidance will serve as a beacon as you navigate your own research endeavors. Remember, research is not a solitary endeavor. It thrives on collaborations, innovations, and passions for discovery. Embrace the challenges, stay curious, and never lose sight of the impact your work can have on the world. As you engage in this workshop and embark on your research journeys, know that our institutions, Southeastern University of Sri Lanka, stand beside you, providing support, resources, and nurturing environment for your intellectual pursuits. I wish you all a productive and enlightening workshop. May your research aspirations to new horizon and contribute to the betterment of the society. Thank you for your dedications to the pursuit of knowledge, and I look forward to witnessing your continuous growth and success. Thank you, and best of luck, and let us proceed with the program. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Riyad,
madam.
for coordinating.
Now I can invite Ms. Tafani Rashid. Now I can invite Ms. Tafani Rashid, a prominent figure in our faculty, to provide a formal introduction of our distinguished resource person for today's session.
Thank you, Dr. Riyad. It's, of course, my privilege to introduce the resource person. Professor Khalid Hussaini is a professor of accounting and finance at School of Accounting, Economics and Finance, Faculty of Business and Law, University of Portsmouth. Currently leading as a research head in the Faculty of Business and Law, his academic journey spans decades, highlighted by impressive achievements, key positions, and a plethora of groundbreaking research publications. He has over 2.5 decades of teaching and research experience at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels. He has a growing research reputation in the field of accounting and finance. He has been featured in the list of world ranking of top 2% researchers in the 2022 database created by experts at Stanford University, USA. He has published more than 200 articles in peer-reviewed journals and has written a number of book chapters and edited 2 books on corporate governance in emerging economies and Islamic accounting and finance. He also won the Best Paper Award from the British Accounting Review in 2007 and the Journal of Risk Finance in 2012. He has supervised more than 70 PhD scholars and has examined more than 130 PhD theses. He has received research grants from the Economic and Social Research Council, the British Academy, and Qatar National Research Foundation, Financial Reporting Council, Plymouth University, the University of Portsmouth, and Abu Dhabi University. He is the co-editor of the Journal of Finance and Reporting and Accounting and Journal of Contemporary Issues in Accounting. He is an associate editor of International Journal of Finance and Economics, the Journal of Applied Accounting Research, and International Journal of Accounting, Auditing and Performance Evaluation, Review of Accounting and Finance, and International Journal of Emerging Markets. In addition, he is also a guest editor for a number of special issues at top-ranked journals. I'm indeed very happy to welcome Professor Khalid Hussaini to address the virtual gathering. Over to you, Professor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you very much, Tafani Rashid, for the good introduction. I would like to start by thanking the Dean of the Faculty of Management and Commerce for her invitation, and also Dr. Riyad Ismail, the Coordinator for Research and Innovation Cell, for his kind invitation. Today, inshallah, I will share my experience in terms of the publication. So by giving some tips which I learned during the publication journey I started about 20 years ago. So this journey I started as a researcher, as a reviewer, as an editor, as an external examiner, internal examiner, student. So this is a summary of my journey. This is a summary of my journey over the 20 years. So the title, as you can see, publishing research articles in higher impact journals. So here the hope by the end of this webinar, we can have some tips about the best way to get our research papers published in high quality journals. So I will discuss many ideas here, or many tips with all of you. The first one is about the publication criteria, what we expect from a paper to be ready for publication. What should you do before you send your paper to a journal article? The second point, which is very important for all of us, how can we write a good research article? So I will give some tips about the best way to present and to introduce your paper before getting this paper published in high quality journal. After that, I will answer the most common question which I received from many researchers about how can we find the right academic journal for our publication. At the same time, I will explain the publication process from the start until the end, step by step. So if you don't have any background about publication, I'm sure that by the end of today, you will have a clear idea about the process itself. After that, I will give some tips about what kinds of decisions you might receive from the editor and what are the main types of the editor's decision. We all know that the editor can accept or can reject the paper, but actually we have 7 different editorial decisions we can make on the paper. And lastly, I will explain the best way to deal with the editor comments as well as the reviewer comments. So how can you reply to the editors and the reviewers? So by covering these 6 points, I am confident that you will have a good knowledge about the publication journey from the start until the end. So when we look at different textbook and different publication, different articles about publication, when they start talking about publication criteria, they have mentioned 6 specific publication criteria. The first one is about your paper to the journal itself. So before you send any of your research to any academic journal, you need to be sure that the journal is interested in your research. So how can we know if the journal is interested in your research? You need to look at the website of the journal, and you need to look at the scope of the journal. Normally, all academic journals have a scope. In their scope, they explain what are the main interests they are keen to publish. So you can see, for example, some journals saying that we are interested in qualitative research only or quantitative research only. Some journals are interested only for research in developing countries, while other is interested for developed countries. So you need to be sure first, before submitting your article to any academic journal, that your research conclusion is of interest and relevant to the journal. So it shows something interested to the reader of the journal. Although this is something we can consider as minor, but it is very important, because preparing your paper and matching the style of the journal might be a very time consuming. And after spending a huge time, if you send the paper to a journal which is not interested in your topic is more likely to be desk rejected. So to save your time, keep in mind the first tip is that you need to think about the scope and the aim of the journal, and your article should match the scope and the interest of the journal. Second one, why journal articles accept your paper? It accepted your paper because you have an incremental contribution to the literature. So without a contribution in your research paper, your paper will not be accepted. Therefore, I strongly recommend that as one of my tips. In the introduction, you should have at least one paragraph about your contribution. So you need to say clearly that I have a contribution in my paper. You need to highlight this contribution in the introduction of your paper. You need to be sure that the findings are not published before. So if you look at, for example, the relationship between disclosure and corporate governance in Egypt, you need to be sure that there is no research on this area before. And if you found any research about the same area, you need to think about what is the incremental contribution your paper is offering above what has been done before. So you need to describe your contribution in the introduction, at least in one paragraph. And also, you need to explain what types of contributions you have. You might have a contribution to theory. You provide a new theory in your context. Or you might have a contribution in your methodology. You use a new method, or you introduce a new variables, which is not covered before in the literature. You also need to explain what's your contribution to practice, if any. If there is any practical problem, and by your research, you suggest a solution, you need to clearly explain. And also, you need to explain your contribution to knowledge. So you might say that there is no research about corporate governance and disclosure in Jordan. So I am the first author to look at this point. So here you add to the knowledge, but at the same time, you need to explain why Jordan, why you believe that Jordan is a unique context compared with other contexts. So this is the second criteria for publication, is a contribution. You should clearly identify, explain the contribution of your work in the paper, specifically in the introduction. Don't leave the reader to wait until the conclusion, because some authors write the contribution at the conclusion. If you look at accounting papers or finance papers in highly ranked journals, you will find at least one paragraph about the contribution in the introduction. Also, one of the key publication criteria is the motivation. Why you do this research? And for this why, you need to answer many whys in your research. So if you look at a research area focusing on Sri Lanka, you need to explain the conceptual motivation. Why Sri Lanka? Why you believe that Sri Lanka is the best country for this particular study? what is the uniqueness of this country. So you need to explain why you select a specific context. If you study the relationship between variables like governance and disclosure, you need to explain the motivation to look at the relationship between these variables. Which theory suggests that there is a relationship between these two variables? So you need to discuss the contextual motivation, theoretical motivation, or empirical motivation. So if you need to look at the impact of COVID-19 on audit quality, for example, explain to the reader what motivates you to look at the impact of COVID-19 on audit quality. Why you believe that audit-19 should affect audit quality. So generally speaking, when you talk about motivation, you need to explain why you do that. If you focus on financial crisis, why financial crisis? If you focus on, let's say, banking sector, why you focus on banking sector? So try to always explain the motivation of your research. Also, the methodology itself. So you might have interesting contribution, a very strong motivation, but your research methodology is not the right one. So here you need to justify and support your research methodology. You need to convince the editor and the reviewers that you have used the right research method. Because if they trust that you use the right research method, this will increase the chance that your findings will be credible. That's why we always suggest that when you write the research method, try to write the research method in details. Tell the reader what's your dependent variable, what's your independent variable. Don't tell the reader that you use 100 firms. Explain why you believe that 100 firms is sufficient sample for your analysis. On what basis you select these 100 firms. Sometimes you can say that I looked at this idea from 2000 to 2022. Explain to the reader why you started from 2000 and why you ended by 2022. Sometimes even for the variables, we can say that I measure disclosure by counting the number of sentences related to risk disclosure. Explain to the reader that why you believe the number of sentences is a good measure for disclosure. So if you measure any variables, all your measurements should be supported by the literature. So don't leave the editor or the reviewers asking you questions about why you do that. Try to justify and support all steps you have done. Even if you use the regression model, like I use OLS regression, explain to the reader why you believe that OLS is the best model for your analysis. Don't say I use fixed effect or random effect or GMM without explanation why. So methodology here is very important as one of the key area for a publication criteria. Also, after you do the analysis, of course, you need to discuss this analysis. So for the discussion of the analysis, you need to link the analysis with the theory, with the literature, with the context. But also in the conclusion, you have to answer the so what questions. You found a relationship between Y and X. Okay, so who might be benefit from such relationship? So you can explain the implications of the findings, whether they have any managerial implications or theoretical implications or practical or policy or regulatory implications. So you try to reflect your findings on the research or on the practice. And finally, the paper should be well written, because sometimes once you submit the paper, the editor just reads the title and abstract, he might find some grammatical mistakes, he rejects the paper directly. So keep in mind that English is a key element in any academic paper. So before submitting your paper, I strongly recommend that you need to send the paper to someone who is native speaker, native English speaker, to read it, to proofread your English language. So sometimes my students and some of my colleagues ask me, can we use a software for academic writing to check grammar like Grammarly? I said, no, please try to read yourself. Ask a human to read it, and then you can use any software. But without human reading a native speaker one, I think you need to be careful before you submit your paper to a journal. So there is no translation software is useful. So some of my colleagues might write something in Arabic or French and just use Google Translation to translate to English and submit to the journal. They directly get a desk rejection. So please, once you write, try to write it in English, even if it is very poor English, and then consult a native speaker to check the English and give you some advice. And it is your own responsibility as an author to consider these comments. So if you give this paper to someone who is native speaker, this doesn't guarantee that your paper will be perfect in terms of English. So he might suggest you some wording, and this wording might affect negatively the quality of your paper. So you need to read to understand and to be careful that the translator or the person who review your paper doesn't affect the quality of your paper. I remember one time I sent my paper to a native speaker, he's British, and he reads the paper, and when he looked to the word return in accounting means profit for the firm, but the proofreader doesn't like the word return. So whenever he sees the word return, he changed the word to going back. So he changed the concept from return, accounting concept, to the general word like going back. And when he see annual report, he replaced annual with yearly report. I said, no, I am accountant and we have our own terminology. We can't change the terminology. I asked him just to correct any grammar mistake, if any, but don't changing the wording. That's why when you talk with a proofreader, ask him to proofread the paper, not editing the paper. Edit means that he will read and paraphrase. Paraphrasing will destroy the story of your paper. Just ask him to proofread, and if he found any mistakes, he can recommend some correction for these mistakes. So finally, we need to be sure that when we write the paper, we write a good quality paper for publication. So what is a good quality paper? Normally, when we look at any research paper, especially those published in high-ranked journals, we will find the following. We find the title. Normally, you will find the title is very short title. I will say that between 8 words up to 15 words. So this title should reflect the research problem and also should reflect the contribution of your paper. After that, you will find the abstract. In the abstract, you will find specific information for the reader. You should find one sentence at least about the objective of the paper, then the methodology used to achieve this objective, and the key findings and the contribution of the paper. If you go to the next page of this article, you will find the introduction. So normally, when we review a research article and when we decide whether this research article should be accepted or rejected, we try to find out if the author covered many ideas. First of all, in your introduction, you need to be sure that you discuss the research problem. Tell the reader what the research problem is. Also, you need to explain your research aim and the objectives. Research questions, you should have a research question. Research motivation, why you do this research. Research importance, why this research is important. You need to clearly and fully explain the research contribution, key findings, and the introduction ended by a short paragraph which discusses the structure of the paper. Then we move to the literature review. One tip for the literature review is the critical literature review. You need to be sure that your literature review is not descriptive. Your literature review should be critical. The main purpose of writing this critical literature review is to identify the research gaps in the literature and to explain how your research will contribute to fill at least one of these gaps. Also, you need to explain the similarities and differences between your paper and the previous research. So you need to highlight the incremental contribution of your research in this part. Then, if you are a quantitative researcher, you need to develop a research hypothesis. And in order to develop a good research hypothesis, you need to find out a theory which help you to explain the result from the previous literature, and then you need to use the theory, the context, and also the empirical literature to develop the research hypothesis. Then the research method, here, every single step you have taken should be justified. So you need to justify the research method, you need to justify the sample selection criteria, you need to justify the sample period, you need to explain step by step your data collection process, you need to mention to the source of your data, you need to explain, classify your variables, which one is dependent, which ones is the independent, if you have any moderator or any mediator or any control variables. So you need to provide the definition of the variable and the measurement, and of course, the source of data. Then you do the empirical analysis, and in your empirical analysis, you will present your result. You will tell the reader if you accept or reject your research hypothesis and provide an answer for the research questions. And of course, you need to support your findings by the tables you have. So if you say that I found positive relationship between two variables, you need to mention which table the reader need to look at to find this positive relationship between the variables. And once you present the empirical analysis, one of the most important points in your research paper is a discussion. You need to discuss your findings. If there is no discussion in your paper, again, the paper is more likely to be rejected. So you need to tell the reader the story. What did you find? And then link your findings with 3 points. You need to link the findings with the literature. You need to link the finding with the theory. And finally, you need to link the finding with the context of your study. Again, the context here, if we find positive relationship between variables, we need to explain why this relationship is positive in the country of interest. After the discussion, you need to provide the conclusion and the rest of references. So in the conclusion, what I can advise here is that in your conclusion, try to provide an answer to the research question raised in the introduction. Try also to provide a brief evidence that your research objectives have been achieved. And then discuss the implications of your findings, discuss also the research limitations, and finally suggest some ideas for future research. The final point in the references, 2 advices here. The first one, when you plan to submit your paper to any specific journal, try to look at this journal and try to cite papers from the journal you're planning to submit to and cite these papers in your article. Second point, you need to be aware about the top-ranked journals in your field and try to cite relevant articles from these top-ranked journals. So now the paper is almost ready for submission. The question is, which journal I should submit to? In order to decide which journal is more suitable for your paper, what I will advise you to do, you need to look at the list of references at the end of your paper. During the writing process and your journey in research, you use many articles. So if you look at the list of references at the end of your paper, you can identify academic journals that are interested in your topic. So you need to review these articles that say journal X, I cited this journal 10 times. Journal Y, I cited this journal 5 times. So Journal X will be my target. So before I submit to Journal X, what should I do? First of all, you need to look at the aim and the scope of the journal, whether the journal is interested in your context or not. This is the first point. Second point, you need to get some information about the journal. So first of all, you need to find out if the journal is peer-reviewed or not. If the journal is ranked in ABS or Scopus or ISI or ABDC or not. If the journal has impact factor or not. And also in most of the journals I know, they mention to the average time to acceptance. If you open any recent article published in the journal, you can see the submission date and the acceptance date. So from these dates, you can know the average time to acceptance, and then you can make a decision. But here I just advise you that you need to decide one journal only. It is not ethical to submit your paper to different journals at the same time. So if you submit your paper to 2 journals at the same time, this will be considered as an ethical issue, and you will be banned from publishing in these 2 journals for 5 years. So just submit one journal and wait until you hear from the journal. So once you decide which journal you will submit to, my advice here, you need to read the most recent published paper in this journal to understand how the authors presented their research ideas in this paper. If you have any colleague who published in the same journal, you can learn from the experience of your colleagues. This will help a lot. Before submission, you have to follow the instructions to author. Some journals have some rules about the abstract, about the length of the article, about how to present your references. So reading and following the instructions to authors is very important. Also, it might be a good idea to know who are the editors and the associate editors of the journal. If they are expert in your area, you can cite their work in your paper before submission. And of course, any paper relevant to yours published in this journal should be also cited. So now your paper is almost ready for submission, and you have a clear idea about which journal you will submit to. And also, I assume that you follow the instructions to the authors. What is the next step? The next step is to understand the publication process. So the publication process started by having a complete research paper. What else you need to start the publication process? You need to have also what we call here cover letter. In this cover letter, it's a letter attached to your paper. It will be considered as a helping tool. It will be considered as a tool which help you to sell your paper to the journal editor. So what's the importance of this cover letter? This cover letter will help you to explain in very nice words why you believe that your paper should be interested to the journal readers. Also in the cover letter, it will be an opportunity to suggest any reviewers or oppose any reviewers. Cover letter is not mandatory in all journals. Some journals ask for it, others are not. So how it looks like, what is the structure of this cover letter? If you look at this letter in front of us, this is a very simple format of the cover letter. In this letter, I just tell the editor that I'm pleased to send you a paper that we wish you consider for publication in your journal. Then what is highlighted in red is the very important keywords that you need to highlight it in your cover letter. This is an entirely new paper that represents original contribution to accounting literature. And in one sentence, I can explain what the contribution is. In the last paragraph, I say that we strongly believe that your journal would be the best place to publish our paper. In red, I confirmed that this paper is our original unpublished work and has not been submitted to any other journal for review. So this cover letter is important, and you can write more about your contribution in this cover letter. Don't copy and paste any text from your paper to put it in the cover letter. Try in your words to explain what are the main contribution of your paper. Also, in the cover letter, there is another style of the cover letter. You can recommend some reviewers. I'm sorry, there's something happened. So if you look at point number 4, you can see that in this cover letter, I recommend for expert or for reviewer. So I can write the reviewer name, address, email address, expertise, and the relation with this reviewer. So once we are ready now, we can submit the paper to the journal. What happens when you submit the paper to an academic journal? The paper reach the editorial office. They try to look at your paper to see if is in line with the aim and scope of the journal. If you follow the instructions to the authors, if you don't follow the instructions to the authors, the editorial office might return the paper back to you to follow these instructions. Also, most of the journal use Turnitin or any other software to check for plagiarism. And also, they look at your cover letter to see if you suggest or oppose reviewer. Then the editorial office send a letter to the editor or senior or associate editors, just summarize what they found, and then the associate editor or the editor read the paper in details. And during reading, they try to find out if you have something new in your paper, if the contribution is new, do you have any new theory, if your literature is comprehensive and up to date, to what extent you have used the appropriate research method, if your result is interesting, if you provide and explain the implications of your findings or not, and whether the findings is clear or not. If the answer to most of these questions is yes, the paper will be sent to the reviewer. So in this figure, it's give a very brief summary of what happened since you submit your paper to the journal. So normally you submit the paper to the journal, the editor will take between 7 days up to 10 days to look at your paper and to make a decision. The decision will be either to reject your paper directly or send the paper to reviewer. Directly is called disk rejection, which means that the paper is rejected without consulting academic reviewers. The second option, the paper is sent for reviewer. You select 2 or 3 reviewers based on the journal policy. The reviewer take offer time between months and 3 months in some journals. So if the 2 reviewers recommend acceptance, the paper could be accepted. If the 2 reviewers recommend rejection, the paper could be rejected. In most cases, you might receive major revision or minor revision. Some authors are in hurry and feel disappointed once they receive major revision. So some authors decide to withdraw as soon as they get the revision option. Others might work on the revision with minor or major and resubmit. After resubmission, the editor, if it is minor, can make the decision directly. If it is major, he might send the paper again to the same reviewers. So after resubmission, the paper could be accepted or invited again for resubmission or rejected. From this figure, you can see that the acceptance rate for this journal is 20%, and for most accounting and finance journals is 20% or less. I know some journals, the acceptance rate, and as you can see, rejection rate is 65%, very high. That's why we need to follow the process correctly from the start until the end to increase our chance to get the paper published. So, what kind of decisions the editor take during the review process? As you can see, we have 7 different editorial decisions. The first one is called desk rejection. The second one, desk rejection with major development required. The third one, which we like all of us, acceptance without any correction. Number 4, conditional acceptance. Number 5, revise and resubmit. And after revise and resubmit, the paper could be accepted without any correction, or conditionally accepted, or rejected and invited for resubmission. Decision number 6, rejection. Number 7, rejection and invitation to resubmit as a new paper. So what I will do now, I will try to explain the meaning of each of these decisions, the potential reasons for these decisions, and the best way to respond to the editor and reviewers when you receive any of these decisions. So let's start by the first one, desk rejection. What desk rejection mean? Desk rejection means that your paper is rejected without consulting the reviewer. Why? Many reasons. One of these reasons, you might fail to meet the submission requirement. So what does it mean? It means that if you don't follow the instructions to author, your paper is more likely to be desk rejected. So this is one of the reasons. The second reasons here, your paper might be very good paper, but doesn't fit with the journal. There is no match between your paper and the scope of the journal. So this rejection here is fair enough because the journal editor try to avoid placing any burden on the reviewer during the review process. And also, the editors don't want to waste your time to wait for a long period of time in the review process, and then your paper will be rejected. So when I looked at different research articles which talk about desk rejection, I found that there are many reasons for why paper could be desk rejected. As you can see, the first potential reason is a mismatch with the journal aim and scope. What does it mean? It means that your paper is about, let's say, management accounting, but the journal is not interested in the field of management accounting. They are interested, let's say, in taxation. And your paper is not about taxation at all. Second reason, failure to format your paper according to the journal guidelines. You don't follow the instruction of the paper, of the journal. The third reason, there is nothing new and significant in your research article. Number 4, you don't consider any theoretical framework in your paper. Number 5, there is inadequate connection with the key articles in the area, either those articles published in the journal itself or other top-ranked journals. Number 5, sometimes your paper is rejected or desk rejected because you have a major problem in your research method. For example, if you look at the relationship between corporate governance and corporate performance, you should consider the indigeneity problem. So nowadays, if you don't consider the indigeneity problem, your paper will be desk rejected in almost most of the finance journals. Number 7, problems in the interpretation of the findings. You have very interesting findings, but the interpretation of the finding is wrong. You misunderstand the finding. Number 7, poor quality of writing. The paper is poorly written. You have many grammatical and mistakes and errors. The last one, it is an ethical issue. Ethical issue means that plagiarism, if we put your paper, we can see the similarity with others, and the similarity, let's say 20% or above. Sometimes self-plagiarism, which means that you copy and paste some material from your own published paper. This might cause a problem at the same time. Also, submission of the same paper to 2 journals at the same time, this also cause problem for you, which lead to a disk rejection. So, if you received a disk rejection, what should you do? First of all, if you receive a disk rejection, don't be angry. Don't send any aggressive email to the editor. Try to be wise. Try to understand the reason for the disk rejection, and then think about how to move forward. So if your paper is rejected because it doesn't fit with the journal, next step, you need to search for a journal that fits well with your paper. But if the paper fit with the journal, but it is rejected because the editor raised a number of concerns, you need to consider the comments raised by the editor before resubmitting the paper to the same or to another journal. In some academic journals, they are not allowing authors to submit rejected paper to the same journal. So you need to be aware of the policy of the journal. The second decision is called disk rejection with major redevelopment required. Here, the paper again is disk rejected, which means that it is rejected without sending this paper to academic reviewer to evaluate it. But at the same time, the editor or the associate editor believes that the paper has a potential to be published. So they read the paper, they found some strengths in the paper, and at the same time, they found some significant weaknesses. So what they do, they reject the paper, they give you feedback to improve the quality of the paper, to make some major redevelopment, and ask you to submit again to the same journal after you consider the comments. So when you resubmit the paper to the journal, what should you do? You need to provide a cover letter to explain how you consider the comments raised by the editor or by the associate editor. So normally we prepare like a table like this one. So we start by thanking the editor and the associate editor for the comments. We write down the comments we received. We write down the reply to each of these comments, and then we mention to the page number in which we put this answer. So after that, we submit the paper, and then the editor, if they believe that you consider their comments, he will send the paper to reviewers to evaluate. The third decision, which we all like and hope in one day, is acceptance without any correction. Here, after different revision, you might receive this letter from the journal saying that we are pleased to accept your paper titled whatever in its current form. So once your paper is accepted, what should you do? Say, Alhamdulillah, I'm fine, I got it. So the paper now is accepted. So here's some advices once you receive the acceptance from the journal. Try to send a thank you email to the editor to keep a good relation with the editor. So in the future, he will recognize your name for any future submission. If this acceptance came to you after different rounds of revision, you need to write a footnote to thank the editor and the reviewers for their valuable comments and efforts in improving the quality of your paper. What else you need to do? You need to proofread your paper. And if you found any spelling or grammatical mistakes, try to inform the editor about these mistakes. It will be your chance to update your information. If you change your email address or university name, you can update your information. You will sign the copyright form with the journal. And once the paper is ready for publication, the publisher will send you the proof in PDF file, and you might have some comments about your paper. You need to address these comments before the paper be published on the journal website. The fourth decision is revise and resubmit. Revise and resubmit, here we have two different types of revise and resubmit. We have minor revise and resubmit or conditional acceptance, and we have the major one. So in the first decision here, I called it as conditional acceptance because normally we consider it as conditional acceptance if we found the editor write in their email that I am pleased to accept your paper for publication subject to the following minor comments, or the paper is conditionally accepted subject to minor comments. And when you read the comments, I wrote here two comments as an example. Reviewer 1 asks you to improve the motivation of your paper. Reviewer 2 asks you to discuss the limitation of your paper, suggest ideas for future research, and to proofread the paper before final submission. As you can see, the comments raised by the reviewers are very minor, and you could easily consider these comments before submission. So what you need to do, you can send email again to the editor to thank him or her for his efforts. You need to remember to write acknowledgement to thank the editor and the reviewers for their valuable comments. Of course, you need to address the comments to get the acceptance letter. And here you can prepare a table to address these comments. Here, the paper is accepted subject to minor comments. So it is not mandatory to consider all the comments, but at least you need to justify if you disagree with any of the comments raised by the reviewer. So here's a table we can produce. Reviewer number 1 have just one comment, improve the motivation of your paper. Author reply, thank you for your comments. The motivation is now improved. See page number 3. If you look at reviewer 2, discuss the limitation of your study. The reply is research limitations are now discussed in the conclusion. Thank you for raising this issue. Look at page 20 and so on. So here we should reply in a professional way, and this is one of the ways you can present a table which show the reader how did you address each of the reviewer comments. Then you need to resubmit the paper and the cover letter. So you can have a polite cover letter to thank the editor and the reviewer for their time and valuable comments. You need also to use to mark the change in your manuscript. So to help the reviewers and the editor to see what change you have done in your paper. So clearly mark change in the revised manuscript. So you can use different color or you can use track change when you revise your paper. So you need to submit both the revised paper and the reply to the reviewers. And you need to wait a couple of weeks to get the news from the journal. Some journals, even if it is minor correction, send it to the reviewers again, but majority might decide that the decision will be taken by the editor himself if he believes that the correction is very minor and the paper is very close to the acceptance. Number 5, measure, revise, and resubmit. So measure, revise, and resubmit here is different from minor, revise, and resubmit. Measure, revise, and resubmit means that both reviewers like your idea. Both reviewer believes that you have a potential contribution, but at the same time, they have major concern about your research. So they can't accept your paper, and at the same time, they didn't reject your paper. So they give you a chance to revise your paper. So major revision here doesn't mean that the paper is accepted or rejected. I can see that you have 50% chance for the paper to be accepted, 50% chance for the paper to be rejected. So what you need to do, you need to be sure that you addressed the reviewer comments clearly and clearly as much as you can. So again, you need to present this nice table to write down the reviewer comments and to explain how did you address each of these comments and where did you address these comments. But remember that it is major revision. So the paper is not accepted. The paper is not rejected. Some editors say that it is a very risky decision or very risky major revision. Why it's risky? Because there is no guarantee that the paper will be accepted or rejected. You don't know. So this is one of the major steps in the publication process. So when you reply to the reviewers, you need to follow 3 rules, which called here golden rules for responding to the reviewer comments. When you reply, you need to have these rules in mind. So I read this article by Williams 2014. I read about these 3 rules. The first rule tells you that you need to answer completely. What does it mean? It means that when you answer to the reviewer comments, please try to provide a complete answer to the reviewer, so the reviewer will not keeping asking you to do more revisions. So you need a complete answer. So close the door for him or her to ask you further questions. Rule number 3 is answer with evidence. So when you answer completely and provide an evidence to your answer. When I read this article, I so surprised when I saw that rule number 2, answer politely. So what does it mean? We know that we are in the academia are very polite. We try our best to write polite statements to the reviewer. We appreciate the comments we have received. But why this author mentions that answer politely? Because some of us researchers are not native speakers. So might use a language which might be considered as impolite language to the reviewers. And if your language is impolite to the reviewer, in this case, the reviewer might try to defend his opinion and provide evidence that he is right, you are wrong, and the paper is more likely to be rejected. So in this article by William 2014, he provides some examples of impolite statements. So he mentioned, for example, that you can't reply to the reviewer by saying that we totally disagree with the reviewer. Or you can't say that it is clear that the reviewer doesn't know anything about the field of my study. Don't say there is a clear misunderstanding here by the reviewer. Or don't say this is unfair point raised by the reviewer. Because if you write some kind of these sentences, the reviewer will start defending his position and his opinion, and he might say, based on this kind of discussion, I will reject your paper. So that's why Williams 2014 says that answer completely, answer with evidence, and at the same time answer politely. So how can we answer politely? You can politely say that I agree with the review, that, but, and after but, you can provide a complete answer and supporting your answer with evidence. The referee is right to point out, and then yet. In accordance with the reviewer wishes, we have now changing the sentence to, whilst we agree with the reviewer that, it is true that, and then but. So you can appreciate the comments raised by the reviewer firstly, and then you can say what is your view about this point politely with details and with evidence. So this will increase your chance to get your paper published. Some other notes here, just I need to raise. If you have a major revise and resubmit, you need to be sure that you have addressed all the comments raised by the reviewer. Because if you don't address all the comments raised by the reviewer, your paper might be invited for major revise and resubmit again, or the paper might be rejected directly, and also the paper could be rejected and invited to resubmission as a new paper. Second point, when you address the reviewer comments, you need to be sure that you have addressed all the comments for each reviewer. Otherwise, the paper could be rejected. Decision number 6, rejection based on the reviewer. I will tell you the story. You send the paper to the journal. The editor believes that the paper might have a contribution. He sent it to the associate. The associate shares the same belief like the editor, and he select 2 reviewers for the paper. So the review process might take 3 months up to 6 months in some journals. So you are waiting now for 3 up to 6 months to hear the good news. After the review process is completed, both reviewer decided that the paper should be rejected. And here you can see that the editor should be rejected based on the reviewer comments, and he will attach the reviewer comments with his email. Another style of the email, you can see that the editor can summarize the main reasons for rejecting your paper. So in this example, this is mainly because of unclear research question. Your research question is not clear. Weak hypothesis development, lack of sufficient contribution to the literature, or the text is not sufficiently clear and coherent. Here, the editor summarizes the main reason for the rejection and attach the reviewer comments with his email. So, what are the main reasons for the paper to be rejected by the reviewer after this long process? So, the reviewer might decide that the paper should be rejected because there is no contribution, or because the contribution is marginal, very little, or the research questions you try to answer is not new. The reviewer also might reject your paper if the motivation is not clear, or if they believe that you just replicate a study using different context, or if your theoretical framework is not discussed in your paper, or there is no theoretical framework at all. Your paper could be rejected if you have something major in your empirical analysis and your research methods, like you don't justify your method, your method is not clear, your sample has some concern, your sample is very small, you might have sample bias or wrong analysis, and so on. So if you have anything which considered as major problem in your research method, this also might lead to a rejection. Also, the paper could be rejected if you fail to answer the so what questions. The paper could be rejected if the reviewer believes that the structure of your paper is very poor, the language is very poor, and also it is not clear. The paper is not easy to read and to follow based on your own writing. Sometimes the reviewer recommend rejection if you cite poor quality research paper. So look at the quality of your citation to increase your chance to get your paper published. Last point mentions that the paper could be rejected if you submitted your paper to 2 journals at the same time. And you might be unlucky here because some researcher submit the same paper to 2 different journals. And the 2 journals send this paper to the same reviewer. And in this case, the reviewer will inform the 2 journals and the paper will be rejected. So what should you do if your paper is desk rejected? So if your paper is desk rejected, we talk about it. But if your paper is rejected after a review process, it is not a good idea to write any aggressive email to the editor. You need to relax. You need to think about the next step. And to start the next step, you need at least to read the comments raised by the reviewer and improve your paper based on these comments as much as you can, and then think about another journal for submission. The last decision for the editor to take is what we call here reject and resubmit. So what reject and resubmit means or indicates? The story again, you submitted your paper, the editor liked your idea, believes that you might have an incremental contribution. He sent it to the associate sends the paper to 2 reviewers. So what happened now? The 2 reviewers read your paper and decided to reject your paper. So your paper now is rejected based on reviewer comments. But at the same time, the editor believes that the idea itself is interesting and might add value to the literature. So what the editor do? The editor, although the paper is rejected, he rejects the paper and at the same time offer you a chance to consider the reviewer comments and to resubmit the same paper to the same journal. So what should you do as an author? As an author now, you have 2 options. Option 1 is to revise your paper based on the reviewer comments and to resubmit the paper again to the same journal. And in this case, the editor might send the paper to the same reviewer or different reviewers. The option 1. Option 2, because the paper is rejected, you can simply revise or not revise the paper based on the comment raised and submit the paper elsewhere. What option I prefer? I prefer option number 1 because I have 3 successful stories with option number 1. When the paper is rejected and invited for resubmission, I considered all the comments raised by the reviewer. I submitted to the same journal. I strongly believe that the editor sends the paper to the same reviewer, and I got minor correction, and then the paper is accepted. So it might be ideal if you are not in rush to get the paper published, is to consider the comments raised by the reviewer and to submit to the same journal. If you are in rush and you need this publication quickly, before submitting the paper to another journal, try to address some of the comments before submission. For example, if the reviewers believe that the English language is not good, at least try to proofread your paper for submission. If they believe that there are some issues which are not clear in your paper, try to clarify what is not clear in your paper before the resubmission. Why? Because the other journal might send the paper to the same reviewer. Because normally journals send the paper to reviewers who are expert in the area. So if you have a paper about narrative disclosure, and it's one of my major research interests, if you submit the paper to any journal, I most likely get this paper as a reviewer because my profile, all my publication is about narrative reporting. So if you receive rejection, try to address some of the comments from the reviewers before resubmission. I think that's all for what I have about the publication journey. We still have time for any questions or comments from colleagues. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to listen to your comments or questions.
Thank you, Professor Khalid Hosseini, for your enlightening presentation. So now we invite you to unmute your microphone as we begin the question and answer session. So your active participation will make the session even more enriching. So let's continue for our question and answer session. So if anybody have questions, so we can unmute your mouth. Yeah.
Thank you so much. First of all, Dr. Ismail, to organize this kind of workshop, and thank you so much, Khalid Hosseini sir, for a wonderful session, and it was very informative and insightful session. And surely we'll have now more and more acceptance decisions after getting the insights. So I have recently published a few papers in ABDC BA Web of Science Q1. So in one of my paper, I have submitted to Economics Journal of Economic Studies ABDCA. I got the major revision in the first round. So I found that the comments of the reviewers were just, it was so much critics about that paper, and one reviewer was praising my work, and he was saying the work is absolutely good and contributing the literature without any changes. It should be published, and it covers the entire aspects of microfinance. Another is opposing. Another is opposing that the methodology is not good, your structure is not good, he was criticizing on each and every aspect. So finally it got rejected. But why it is contradictory of the same paper, but two reviewers are giving the contradictory statements and reviews?
Okay, thank you for your question. Very difficult one because we are human. So one reviewer might be in a good mood and he likes the paper. I'm not sure if he's expert in your area or not. So he might be expert and
Right.
like the paper and believes that you have done everything rightly. So he's very honest. Or he might be not expert in your area and just try to get like a benefit of getting a reviewer for this journal. So he's very, very positive in all elements. The other one also, I'm not sure. So I didn't read the comments, but by reading the comments, if I reject the paper, I should provide scientific reasons why the paper should be rejected. If I said this rejected because I don't like the methodology, I don't like the literature, I don't like this not scientific way of the comments. So I think based on the scientific comments, you can guess if the reviewer are expert or not. But as humans, I might like something, you might dislike. So today, for example, I'm sure that we have 182 people. Some people might like what I say today. Some might be very, very disappointed because they expect something else. So we are human, but by reading the comments, you can recognize if you got a fair accept or a fair reject from the reviewers or not.
Yeah, it's maybe it's a review process is like a by a reviewer, right? Peer review. It's not an expert review. I understand, and the reviewers are also human. I understand totally, but in some cases, I find that by reading the comments, that maybe the case is that I'm working on some manuscript, and at the same time, maybe that reviewer also working on the same idea, and he or she don't want to that paper to publish before him or her.
Yeah, because we are human. This might be the case, but you can't provide evidence on the case. So it might be, but I can't confirm if it's the case or not. But what I can advise you, just you need to move forward. You need to find out what are the key criticism you received from the other reviewer. Try to consider these criticism as much as you can and just submit with the hope that the paper will be accepted or get minor revision. That's what I can advise you to do.
Right. Thank you so much for
Thanks a
wonderful
lot.
session. It's all about farming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asif Khan. So any question, other questions?
Yes, Dr. Yusuf.
Yeah, good morning, Professor Khalid.
Good morning, Dr. Yusuf.
Yeah, my name is Yusuf Nuhu. I'm a PhD student here in the UK. And I want to seize this opportunity to thank you for taking your time to mentor PhD students and early career researchers. You have dedicated time again and again mentoring PhD students, and we appreciate it all over the world. I have interacted with many PhD students in conferences, and every single PhD student will mention Khalid Hussein as somebody that listens to us and give us advice. I have two questions, Prof. My first question is about publishing in either special issue or the main, sending to the main journal. Then secondly, considering the time frame it takes to publish in high-ranking journals like ABS 4, ABS 3, can you advise a PhD student to take risks and I call it risks, and send his journal to a high-ranking journal like ABS 3 or ABS 4, or to take it easy, publish in ABS 1 and 2, then later on with experience, start sending to ABS 4, 4-star or ABS 3. Thank you very much once again for your time, and we appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. So the first question is about should we publish in a regular issue or a special issue for a journal? My advice here doesn't matter if the special issue is the same scope like your paper. I strongly advise you to publish in a special issue because publication in special issue might be much quicker than publication in the regular issue. So the special issue will be specialized in specific topic. So this you might have a chance to get your paper published quickly compared with publication in the regular issue. In terms of the quality, it doesn't matter. The quality will be the same if the paper is published in a regular issue or a special issue. In the second point, you asked about PhD student should be published in high-ranked journals like ABS 4 or 3, or should we have like 1-star or 2-star publication? I strongly advise you, if you have time, to start by ABS 4 or at least ABS 3 to learn from the review process. So if your paper is accepted, you will learn a lot, and this will be a very strong motivation to move forward on the same level of publication. If your paper is rejected, you will get very, very detailed and useful feedback to improve the quality of your work. In my PhD, when I was in the third year, I tried this scenario. I started by ABS 3. This was my first publication 20 years ago. And I got minor correction from the first round. And this paper, because it published from my PhD, I awarded the PhD without correction. And also, it helps me to get grant. It helps me to get grants from different granting bodies. So it helps me to get a grant. So publication in high quality journals when you are a PhD student will help you to finish your PhD successfully without any problem. At the same time, it might help you to get research grant if you are interested to be a postdoc. Also, it will help you to get a faculty position in the UK if you are interested in that. So in summary, if you are not in a rush in terms of publication, start with 4-star or 3-star. Don't waste your time with 1 or 2-star because this will reduce the value of your work. If I am your external examiner, I will ask you if you believe that your research has a unique contribution to the literature and good value to the literature, why you publish in 1-star journal rather than 3 or 4. So start by 4, 3. If doesn't work, and if you are in a rush to get publication, you can try 2, not 1.
Thank you, Yusuf. So, Professor, are you, if your time permits, so I have some questions from
Yes,
our
please.
audience. Okay, so I have forwarded the question on the chat box. Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, do we highlight the research gap in the literature review section or the introduction section of the paper? Okay, so for the research gap, we need to highlight the research gap in the introduction and in the literature review. Because in the literature review, in the introduction, we need to write a paragraph about the content of the work. And in order to convince the reader that you have a contribution, you need to explain what are the gaps in the literature. So briefly, you can explain the research gaps in the introduction and then explain your contribution. And in the literature review section, you discuss these research gaps in details. So again, research gaps will be discussed briefly in the introduction and in more details in the literature review section.
Okay, sir. And second.
I can see the second question, Doctor. Dr. Riyad, can you share the second question with me? Because I can't see it. I have one question about reviewers. Someone asked me, I'm wondering whether the reviewer sent any remarks related to expanding the sample. So of course, the reviewer has the right to ask you for revision or recommend some revision to your work. So he might ask you to extend the sample or to use any other methods if he or she believes that there's other methods that can deal with the same research problem. So the rest of the question, if the reviewer asks us to extend the sample and to include other countries, but at the same time, we don't have access to data. Just simply you can say that we appreciate your comments. However, we don't have access to this information, and you can consider this as one of your research limitation in your conclusion. Okay, there is another question by Dr. Riyad asking about what is considered as an acceptable level of similarity in academic writing. So because I mentioned in my talk that when you submit your paper to a journal, we use Turnitin to check the similarity. So the acceptable level of similarity is 20% or less. In some journal, they accept 25% or less. And also I know some other journals, 30%. So more than 30%, it will be a big problem. The paper will be rejected. So if it is less than 30 or 25 or 20, what we do, we look at the references you receive or you cited. So each references should have a percentage of 1%. So if it is 20% and 17% from one source, the paper will be rejected. So 20% is acceptable. Sometimes you shouldn't have more than 1% from each source.
Any other questions from audience? Now we conclude the session. Now I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Professor Khalid Hussaini our distinguished speaker for sharing his immense knowledge and insight during this workshop. So your expertise in publishing research articles in high impact journal has been guiding to light us. I also want to express our appreciation to our esteemed Dean of Faculty of Management and Commerce, who provided the value, support, and encouragement to make this workshop reality. To the members of the faculty board who approved and endorsed this event, thank you for your recognizing and importance of advancing research and innovation at our institution. And a special thanks to Tafani Rasid for behind the scene efforts. Lastly, and to all enthusiastic participants, your active engagement enriched our discussion and made this event truly interactive and enlightening. Together, we have taken a significant step toward enhancing our research publication prospect. Thank you all for your contribution, dedication, and commitment to academic excellence.
بحضر سيمينار يعني محاضر بيعمل محاضرة عن النشر الدولي كويس يعني.